Continuing our reading in Poppy and Ereth by Avi. This time it's chapter 23, Bounder the Fox, and chapter 24, On the Trail to Glitter Creek. Chapter 23, Bounder the Fox. Poppy certainly knew foxes ate mice. When she had met Bounder during her first visit to Dimwood Forest, he had tried to catch her, but had succeeded only in chasing her into Ereth's smelly log. That was when she first met Ereth. The porcupine drove the fox away. She smiled at the thought. And here, after all this time, was the same fox. She wished Ereth were with her now. Her smile faded. Poppy wondered if Bounder would remember her. Not that it mattered. If she was going to get out of the cave, she had to get past him. She stayed where she was, occasionally peeking around the tunnel bend to study the fox. All the while, Bounder remained asleep, barely stirring, taking deep, long, and sleepy breaths. Poppy tried to recall what she knew about foxes' habitats. They were fast and clever and did most of their hunting at night. That meant she would have to be very patient and hope that when the day was over, Bounder would get up and leave. Of course, this place could be his main den. Considering the bones, Poppy rather suspected it was. If he had just eaten, Poppy glanced at the bones again, and his belly was full, he might not venture away for days. The warm air coming from the tunnel entryway told Poppy the heat wave had not broken. That could be another reason Bounder might stay put. The tunnel would be a lot cooler than out beneath the sun. Waiting. Poppy ruefully recalled that a short while ago she wanted things to change. Now, here she was desiring nothing more than to return home and have things exactly as they were. Be patient, Poppy chided herself, even as she reminded herself that she had little choice. Still, Poppy acknowledged that flying with Lucy, seeing the bat cave and meeting all those bats had been a wonderful experience. To pass the time, she mused about the possibility of another trip, going elsewhere, doing something completely new. Except next time, if there was a next time, she would take someone along like Spruce. The growling of her empty stomach interrupted her thoughts. Her anxiety returned. Goodness, she thought. I never used to be impatient. I suppose I just want to make the most of the time I have. She peeked around the bend again at the curled up fox. He was still asleep, or so it seemed. Poppy studied Bounder's position. Though he was lying across the entryway, blocking it, she noted that there was more open space in front of him than behind. Was that on purpose? Then she saw, not far from the fox's nose, a slab of rock leaning against the wall. Moreover, the rock's slant made a gap between the rock and the tunnel wall. That gap appeared just big enough for her to crawl behind. Poppy decided she could use the rock as a shield if she could get behind it. Without actually deciding to do so, Poppy knew she was getting ready to sneak past the fox. Taking minute steps, Poppy slipped around the bend. Crouching very low, she crept along where the tunnel wall met the floor, inching forward in the direction of the entryway and Bounder. Every few steps she paused and studied the fox. The closer she came, the bigger he seemed. She glanced at the bone bits and shuddered. Don't go any more, an inner voice kept telling her. But another part told her she was safe because the fox was asleep and lay still, except for the tip of his tail, which twitched ever so slightly. She halted. Was that tail telling her something? Was Bounder setting a trap? Was he just pretending to sleep? Poppy had to catch her breath. When the fox's tail stopped twitching, she inched forward, placing another foot slowly, deliberately down. She breathed as softly as possible. All the while, she kept her eyes fixed on Bounder. The fox's ears flicked. Poppy froze. She studied the leaning rock and that gap. It was only a few feet away. Poppy decided it would be wise to rest behind the stone in the gap before making a final dash to the open air. When the fox's movement ceased, Poppy continued on. Bounder snorted. Again, Poppy stopped. Her heart pounded. She held her breath. She was so close to the rock. When the fox's sounds subsided, Poppy edged forward again. The leaning stone and the protective gap were no more than a foot away. Telling herself she must leap forward now, Poppy tensed her leg muscles. She must not miss the gap. At the last moment, she darted a glance at Bounder. The fox's eyes were wide open, and he was staring right at her. He was grinning hideously, fangs exposed. With a gasp, Poppy hurled herself toward the rock. She was not fast enough. Bounder slapped a paw down, blocking her way. "Got you, mouse," he bayed gleefully. "Got you at last." Chapter 24. On the Trail to Glitter Creek. Spruce gazed down the trail. "I never thought Glitter Creek was so far." All the same, he was positive, or mostly positive, that he was on the right path. And if it did lead to the creek, and if he could find Grandma Poppy, it would be such a great thing. When he brought her home, he'd be a hero to everyone. So Spruce pushed on, making frequent stops, sniffing the air, constantly shifting his ears. But the further he went, the more he began to sense something odd in the air. He stopped. Someone was coming along the path very quickly. Next moment, a rabbit bounded up. Small and brown, the rabbit moved in jerks, 3 hops and a pause, 3 hops and a pause. Spruce leaped to the side of the path to get out of his way. "Hey, rabbit!" he called. "Stop!" The rabbit skidded to a halt and looked around. He used a paw to push a floppy ear away from his frightened eyes. "Oh, what?" he said. "Oh, what's that? Who called me?" It's me, Spruce. Is this the right path to Glitter Creek?" The rabbit stared at Spruce. His nose twitched. He shoved his ears away from his eye again. The creek?" said the rabbit. "Did you say creek? What creek?" "Glitter Creek," repeated Spruce. "Am I on the right path?" The path?" echoed the rabbit. To the creek? It certainly is, but don't go there. You don't want to, not at all." With that, he bounced away down the trail. "Why?" Spruce called after him. "Why don't I want to?" The rabbit stopped barely long enough to shout back, "Because it's bad, very bad, as bad as it gets." Spruce peered down the path and then turned back to the rabbit. "But what's so bad?" he called. The rabbit had gone. Spruce shrugged, glad at least to know the path would take him to the creek. That'll show Dogbane, he thought with pleasure. That'll show everybody. Confidence bolstered, Spruce moved along a little faster. What could be so bad? And that's the end of chapter 24.